Everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers actually getting healthy, and are they paying more attention in this preseason? All of that next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always going to be free. It's never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers to the channel, Andy, all of whom are wondering what's going to happen for these final three preseason games, what it's going to look like. They got Tuesday and then a back-to-back, very interesting back-to-back situation to wrap things up before the 22nd and the beginning of the real games. Do want to let everyone know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So we'll keep talking about some of the highlights of the preseason. Certainly one that they're taking a little bit more seriously, I think, than last year's, Andy. Dalton Knecht, and he's had some interesting moments. Rui Hachimura also has improved after a bad first game. Both of those guys distinguishing themselves a little bit on the boards, which we'll get into, Andy. But let's start with health, because it does appear, maybe kind of sort of, the Lakers could be pretty full, aside from Christian Wood, by the beginning of the season. And I say that despite, Andy, Austin Reaves missing the game last week with an ankle injury, but it doesn't appear to be too serious, and they're just being really careful.
Day-to-day is what he's being listed right now. Dan Wojcicki from the LA Times had a tweet that said that it looked like he may have been practicing in an ankle brace, or at the very least he saw him wearing one, but that Reaves was at least going through what appeared to be pretty intensive workout stuff. You know, who knows if he had participated in the entire practice from Saturday when Dan was reporting this, but at the very least, Austin wasn't sitting out of everything.
Right.
So
he was around. Like, he certainly, like, he wasn't in street clothes, which would be the thing you would worry about. Like, you know, day to day, is that really day to day? No, I mean, this seems like it's kind of day to day. So even if he misses Tuesday's game, for example, it doesn't seem like the kind of thing yet that's threatening the beginning of the regular season.
Yeah, there was also an update on Jarred Vanderbilt from JJ Redick about where he's at right now. And I would personally caution, I'll read the exact quote from Redick, but just as a preemptive measure, just because the situation with Vando is obviously so important for this team, which makes anything that could be interpreted as getting closer really exciting. Unlike at times Rob Pelinka, I would rather err on the side of under-promising and over-delivering. But this was from JJ Redick talking about Vando, quote, "He's following our ramp-up protocol. He has not done any contact work. He has not participated in any non-contact work in practice, but we're still trying to target the beginning of the season. He hasn't had any setbacks. He's continuing to ramp up. A ramp-up process. We're sort of on target. It remains to be seen when he'll be available, but not setbacks as he continues to work his way back." There is a lot of inexact. There's a lot of inexact wording in there. The most important thing I think that Redick said there in terms of something tangible is that there have been no setbacks.
Right.
Like, that's the first thing you need to avoid, is the idea of it's going to take even longer because, say, like what happened with Christian Wood, there was a setback. Wood ended up having to have another surgery.
I mean, like I was going to say, like, that's like a setback that's hard to hide.
Sure.
Got operated on.
But the idea of he's following our ramp-up protocol, a protocol of which we've gotten no timeline whatsoever. We are targeting the beginning of the season. The beginning can be very fluid. Like Game 7, still relatively speaking, the beginning of the season. I mean, when there's 75 games afterwards.
I was thinking Game 7 of a playoff series. No, that's really more to the end. No, but like, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Right. I took this to mean they are not worried about Jarred Vanderbilt in terms of he's not responding the way that he would hope. I think there is always a chance they're just being exceptionally cautious. There's also a chance, too, by the way, given how the Lakers are so incredibly cagey and non-transparent about this stuff, there's a chance that all of a sudden Redick could be ramped up to contact stuff the day before the season opener against the Wolves, and all of a sudden he is available for like 15 minutes. Like, I don't know how long you see him doing contact stuff. I'm just saying, for me, if Vando was available on the 22nd, I would frankly be stunned.
I would be surprised, but I will say this. I interpret this maybe a little bit differently than you do. I think they are trying to sort of underpromise and overdeliver. I think we are far more likely. By the way, this is all just like, there's a lot of wish casting going on here, because you and I both, and every other, Lakers fan out there, like, everybody wants to see Jarred Vanderbilt available on, if not on the 22nd, as damn close. So I look at it this way. I think we are far more likely to hear an update that says Vanderbilt's not going to be ready for he's doing good. He's coming back. We're confident in what we're doing, but we got to be really careful with the guy coming off, 2 surgeries. And so, he's not going to be ready for opening night, but he's going to be ready, sooner rather than later. I think we're far more likely to get something like that than anything that keeps the door open for October 22nd if he wasn't potentially going to be available on the 22nd. Now, that does not mean, I agree with you, that does not mean that he will be in uniform. And if I had to bet on these things, if our friends at FanDuel had a will Jarred Vanderbilt play line, which they might, I don't know, I would put my money on no. But like I said, I am far more of the mind that they would say he's not going to be, to eliminate the expectation and the hope sooner rather than later, than they would just like kind of leaving it open. And that said, if they're leaving it open now, it means like if he might, okay, game 2, game 3, game 4, something like that. My big fear with Vanderbilt, a month ago, especially, was that we weren't going to see him for 3 or 4 weeks into the year, not 3 or 4 games.
I understand what you're saying. The only reason I'm not 100% on board with your beat on it is just because last year, and this is just one example I could draw upon, the Lakers allowed for the possibility of Gabe Vincent being on the verge of returning for about 3 months. So, and we saw this.
I think they've learned.
I mean, I would like to think they learned too, except, Brian, what I was giving as an example with Gabe Vincent came on the heels of us feeling like Kendrick Nunn could be on the verge of returning for a season he never returned.
Right.
So I mean,
sometimes that first time doesn't sink in the second time, but by that third time, you've really drilled down into how you should handle a situation.
Again, this is very much, especially in the LeBron AD era of the Lakers. And I want to make it clear, I'm not saying it's because of LeBron and Anthony Davis. LeBron and Anthony Davis era also coincides with new media relations, new people coordinating practices, information for us, yada, yada, yada. It has been very low on specifics, very big on overarching, broad, sweeping statements that could mean a lot of different things, none of which are concrete.
And they're not unique in that regard, but yes, they're not precise in their language. I just think, and nobody is, and there's very little to be gained by being precise, as we've discussed. It's just a matter of sort of what type of expectation you're setting. So we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, the Lakers do appear to be taking the preseason far more seriously this year than last. We'll discuss some interesting comments from Rui Hachimura next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can enjoy the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Let's say you're watching a game and it feels like you just have a sixth sense for how everything's going to play out. Every touchdown, every turnover, a big sack, a busted run, all of that different stuff. You can confirm your hunches with the latest stats, live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you would place your bet. So all that info is right in front of you. And you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And we are, as we're discussing, getting closer to the 24-25 NBA season. And our friends at FanDuel have options for you there as well. As of this recording, the Thunder are 3-1 favorites to win the Western Conference, followed by the Wolves, Mavs, and Nuggets all tied at 5-1, Grizzlies at 16-1, the Lakers at 19-1, the Warriors 21-1, and the Pelicans and Kings at 22-1. That's FanDuel.com.
So one of the things that you and I, especially you, have really been hoping the Lakers would do would be to take this preseason more seriously, with more intensity, however you want to phrase this, than they did last year. And it is not intended to malign the coaching staff from last year. Last year is different from this year, coming off of Western Conference Finals last year, not coming off of Western Conference Finals this year.
This is a consistent thing going back a few seasons. Right.
Sure.
Pre-Darvin Ham. I just want to make sure it's explicitly made clear. This is not about Darvin. A lot of
teams don't necessarily, particularly teams that consider themselves really good, don't invest in the preseason in terms of like treating preseason games like regular season games. They might ease their stars into things. They might favor rest over whatever because they know they've got a long season to plan for. They maybe have a lot of continuity and a different set of priorities or whatever. The Lakers are not treating like that this year. They are really leaning into the idea of learning the system, using their time as wisely as possible with intensity and purpose, and not overdoing it, but not blowing off preseason games. LeBron and AD have played some. I was on Spectrum on Friday, the Lakers TV station, and we were debating kind of how much LeBron and AD would play. Like, I know Mike Bresnahan, our friend, said he didn't think they'd play in the back-to-back. I think they'll play in 2 of the 3 games that the Lakers have left. I think they will play Tuesday, and I think they will play Friday. I think they'll skip Thursday. And in years past, I think LeBron and AD not only wouldn't have played in all 4 of the 6 games, they wouldn't have necessarily staggered, like they would have played in different games, to which makes like those games more useless. Like the organization of how they're holding players out and who is playing and when has just been better this year and more purposeful. And it's really important given how hard the beginning of the schedule is.
How hard the beginning of the schedule is, how difficult the Western Conference is, how we've seen the last 2 seasons, the Lakers having to make this mad dash post All-Star break just to get themselves into the play-in. And you can write off some of this as bad decisions made with the rotation last year or injuries they had a couple seasons in a row, the Russell Westbrook thing that got in the way of the first half of the season that eventually got to the Western Conference Finals run. Like those factors all were real and they do matter, but some of this too was, at least in my opinion, the team not using the preseason to enough full effect, like as a foundation, looking to get yourselves better at the things that you want to do and just give yourself that head start.
Yep.
And especially in a season where JJ Redick is a coach that needs the reps doing this. Like he needs the reps doing this, and he needs the reps doing this with the players that matter. So you had brought up the idea of how much LeBron and AD will play in the next 3 games. I would like to see them play in as many of the games as possible. If they only played a quarter each, fine. Like I don't need them to play 35 minutes in one of these games. I don't need them to treat it with the exact same seriousness and urgency as you would a regular season game. I certainly don't expect them to treat this like the IST finals or anything like that. But what I do want them, though, is I want them to treat it like it matters.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about winning or losing the games. That's very contextual. What I care about is that they treat this time like it actually has a purpose to it. And I'm really pleased with, by how all accounts and appearances, that seems to be the case.
Yeah. Rui had a really interesting comment where he said that, the Lakers last year, I believe the phrase he used was messed around for 30 or 40 games. And it's an interesting phrase to use because it's both, it can mean a lot of different things. It can mean the intensity with which they played. And I think there are times that they were just too casual. Certainly some games and some moments where they didn't have the focus to close games. They allowed fourth quarters to get away from, or games to go deeper into the fourth quarter than they should, or, a lot of different things. And it can also mean we messed around as a group, like messed around with lineups that were stupid, with coaching decisions that were done. I think it means, particularly like from Rui, a lot of things at the same time. I think it was a commentary a little bit on the organization of the coaching and the decisions. And it took 40 games before they finally got around to doing things that made sense. But also it took longer than it needed to before they as a group rounded into a deeper intensity than they were playing with at the beginning of the season, both of which are not acceptable if you want to maximize and hit your ceiling as a group.
I mean, there were many games when you look back last year. I'm going through the schedule, and there were many games where against lesser opponents, they allowed either a lack of focus, a lack of discipline in terms of the way they played on the court. Like, different variables get in the way. And like, I understand that there is an element of pacing yourself over an 82 game season. It's a cliche, but it is, in the grand scheme of things, a marathon and not a sprint. But I wouldn't know, I've never done a marathon, but from people I've heard,
sure you've done a sprint.
I have done sprinting. I have actually done sprinting.
In a minute, but no, back in the day.
Yes, I have done sprinting. Marathon's too damn long. I've never done anything like that before. I don't even like driving 26 miles. But from people, I know many people who have done marathons, and I know that even as they pace themselves during a marathon,
anecdotally,
I happen to know many people who run.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I think it's insane, but they do it.
Some of my best friends are marathoners.
I happen to know you people. I happen to know that they don't treat the first 25 miles of the marathon indifferently and try to turn it on for the 26th. Like,
crank it up. Here we go.
That's not how it works.
No.
And the regular season is about building up the habits, or as you often like to talk about, Brian, the muscle memory, things like that. It's important to, especially with an organization like the Lakers, that there is so much of an ethos and mythology about, we only play for championships and nothing matters in the regular season. It's only about the playoffs. If they don't win the championship, then the whole season didn't matter, yada, yada, yada. Here's the thing, though. Even if you believe that, the regular season is what sets you up for the playoffs.
You want to build that,
unless you are exceptionally good, and this team is not.
You want to build, whatever, but you don't want to you don't want to have to. The problem with the Lakers in the last couple of seasons, they've had to sprint that last 2 miles, 3 miles, whatever, however deep you want to extend this metaphor.
Which I don't think any of my marathoner friends did.
No. They've had to sprint. And then by the time one year, they sprinted straight through the Western Conference Finals. Worked great. Last year, they sprinted into the first round. But it's not ideal. You're not set up well. You've used more energy than you otherwise would need to. And it's not how you want to have to play these things. And, I think we talked a little bit about this on Friday, I think it was. Some of this enthusiasm is clearly a referendum on the difference between last year's coaching staff and this year's, and the happiness that they have that they are starting from a different place than they were last year. They seem very approving of how JJ Redick is doing things. I also think they are very open to being excited about what Redick is doing, because coming into the season with Darvin again would have the vibes would have been brutal in this preseason. So that part is going with, and it's interesting to see where the Lakers are making some improvements. We talked about Rui. Rui's rebounding, for example, is a place that has ticked up. That has been an emphasis for Redick, as has the contributions for somebody like Dalton Knecht. We'll try to get to all that next. JJ Redick really wants the Lakers to rebound better than they did last year, particularly on the offensive side. To that end, Andy, just go back to Thursday's game. Dalton Knecht had 6 offensive rebounds. That's pretty good. And Rui Hachimura had 8 rebounds in total. And overall in this preseason, particularly when you get past that first game where it just wasn't very good, last couple of games we were much more solid on the boards. And when you talk about the quote unquote next step, that thing that with Rui that Redick kind of threw back at Brad Turner when he asked him about that a week ago or whatever it was. This is one of the things. Becoming a consistent rebounder for someone of his position, size, and athleticism is definitely one of these things that will change the trajectory of how a team can, how good a player somebody like Rui Hachimura can be.
I think it's the commonality, I think, and we'll get into it with Dalton Knecht, between Rui and Dalton. I think when it comes to an emphasis on rebounding, is there's certain weaknesses that both of them have, or if nothing else, perceived with Dalton. We have not seen him during a regular NBA season, but he entered the pros seen as not a particularly good defender, and based off what we saw in Summer League, I think the tag is accurate. And I think defense would theoretically be the thing that keeps him off the court. And Rui is a very, inconsistent, often very matchup and role dependent defender. And I think there are ways that he can be better at it, but it's likely never going to be a strong suit. But something like rebounding with Rui, I think a lot of that is just make a point of doing it. Like, make a point of emphasizing this. There is no reason that, as you mentioned, with your size, speed, athleticism, and Rui, when he wants to be, can be a player with physicality. There's no reason that you can't be better at this if you want to. Like, wanting it can be a cliche, but in this case with Rui and rebounding, I do think there's an element of you have to make it a focus. Like, you need to think about it the same way you would approach putting up shots, because we know you have that focus.
I think it relates a little bit to the conversation that we had about D'Lo last week. It's like, can you trust him to, be a better defender? Like, a lot of, as he said, coming out of media day, it was about focus. It's about the discipline to remember to do things and stay focused and stay, invested in constantly. It requires a lot of mental energy to do things that you are not necessarily used to doing and build those habits and all that kind of stuff. Particularly, for D'Lo, particularly like the amount of reading and stuff that needs to go on and defensively, where if you fall asleep for a quarter of a second, sometimes you're cooked. It is the type of thing that I think this is why it helps that they're emphasizing it as a team. If everybody who stands in that corner is given the responsibility of crashing the boards. And the good God, we've heard a lot about corner crashing since the beginning of training camp. But if that's everybody's job, if that's everybody's expectation, then it's not just about Rui. Max Christie has done that work from that position. Other guys are going to. Vanderbilt will do it from that position. And it's just one of these things that if you build in the expectation and you hold people responsible to it, the second, because I really think second possessions are both designed to, as you've pointed out all the time throughout the course of the last, the Lakers need more shots, whether you're talking about 2-point shots or 3-point shots, they need more shots. And so one way to do that, get more offensive rebounds. But I also think the hope is it can shore up the defense a little bit by forcing teams to stay honest with how they protect their own glass, and they don't get out and run as fast. And even if you're not scoring on the break, you're playing against an unbalanced defense in the half court. It was already like, so I think all of these things are interconnected.
They are definitely interconnected. You brought up Max and Vando as also two guys, Max now, Vando when he's eventually back, who will have those same responsibilities.
October 22nd.
We'll see. As far as having the same responsibility and emphasis as Rui with that corner crashing and everybody else. The difference, though, with Rui versus Vando and Max is I'm not worried for a second that either one of those guys will do it.
They're already good at it. Right.
Right. And also, I mean, the difference between D'Lo and Rui with that sort of focus that you talked about, because it is a comp in the sense of having to want to focus on it, like having to want to remember to make it that emphasis and to drill that into your own head. The difference is, though, there's nothing D'Lo can do to overcome certain physical gifts that he does not have compared to his peers. And with D'Lo, the effort can only go so far in terms of success. In the case with Rui, with the emphasis on rebounding, the guy holding him back is Rui. Like, it's not about physical gifts. It's Rui wanting to do this
There's
more.
some intuition there. Like, rebounding is an intuitive thing. But, like, yes, I by and large, I agree with you. And it's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. I
was going to say, and then with someone like Dalton Knecht, who has shown a real aptitude for rebounding, both in the summer league and in the preseason. You mentioned he had 6 offensive rebounds in the win on Thursday. And many of these rebounds were Knecht going after them, like really leaping high, showing off the idea that he's an athletic kid. Like he may have been a 4-year guy, 4 or 5, however many years he was in college, but it was not because he lacked athleticism.
No, his combine, jump numbers and stuff were near the top.
And his work on the glass, and also too, I think we've seen some instances where Knecht will challenge around the basket and offer some physicality along those lines. These are the things that he can do to make up for the fact that he is not likely this season going to be a super effective defender. Never say never. Like I remember Lonzo Ball, for example, when he came into the pros, the book on him at UCLA was great shooter, awful defender. And it turned out to be the reverse. Like, his shot was broken, but he was a
much better defender than average.
You watched him rookie year and you're like, he's got all defense potential. Like, he was quite good. So never say never, but I'm guessing with Knecht, it's not going to be the case because he doesn't seem to have the intuition.
Yeah.
But I think what Redick wants
he's Rui-like in that way.
Right. But I think what Redick wants from him is to know that he's constantly putting in the effort and that he's constantly competing along those lines to the best of what he's capable of, and shore up the areas you can. Like, if you happen to be connecting, you're good at rebounding, make sure you're contributing there. Because if he ends possessions by grabbing the miss, I don't really care how he did in terms of his personal assignment on that possession. He got him out of it.
I'm because Knecht is a guy who, when everybody's healthy, has the potential to be that 10th guy. If the Lakers play 9 on a relatively consistent 9, there's a potential that a 10th person who would appear periodically in games. Even Redick has said, like, this is not set in stone. They are not carved like the 10 Commandments. But someone who you would say, oh, that guy could play, is not going to. And what I think was so interesting about the game on Thursday was, we've talked at length about the rebounding, but the full box score in terms of 4 assists and stuff like that, the one thing that he didn't do well was shoot. And he's actually, summer league was a bit spotty in the, with the shooting, and the preseason's been a little spotty with the shooting. Put up 16 shots. He's only 5 of 16 from the floor. But I will say this: about 90% of the time when the ball leaves Knecht's hands, it looks like it's going to go in. I expect it to go in.
He looks the part.
The shot, and there are guys who have come through the NBA that you just don't understand why the ball's not going in, because it just looks so pretty when they let it go. But, it takes time. But, to use a football analogy, like, it wouldn't shock me if for the first 10 games or so of his career, Knecht struggles a little bit. It's just a little different, whatever it might be. And then it clicks and he starts shooting like he's advertised, in the same way that somebody like Caleb Williams got off to a, bad start with the Bears first 3 or 4. Like, what? The NFL's hard, man. Last couple weeks, though, you're like, oh, that seems to be why he was selected where he was. So, I think a little bit of patience is required, but I do think my inclination is that Redick wants to figure out a way to get him into the lineup because of that shooting and the ability, the way that shooting,
the scoring. He's not just a shooter. He can take the ball on the floor. Sure. He can get to the basket.
He moves the ball nicely and all that kind of stuff. Especially if you tailor his role in more specific ways, not asking him to be a floor general. I do think, all things being equal, Redick would love for him to be somebody who contributes because of what he can do for the offense.
Well, this is also too why I have not worried about the games where he's like 5 of 16 or 4 of 14, because he's not going to get that many shots in a game. And some of these shots that he's putting up and missing, I think he is knowingly doing this because this is the time for me to workshop this stuff. He said afterwards, LeBron told him, keep shooting.
I like that he keeps shooting. I'd rather him be 5 for 16 than 2 for 8.
Right. Or when he's out on the floor with, no disrespect to man of the hour Quincy Oliveri and like Armel Traore, who by the way has a hand injury, Maxwell Lewis and Colin Castleton. He's going to be putting up some shots because, frankly, I don't know if I want anyone else putting them up. It's a short amount of people. It's basically him or Oliveri, or I guess Castleton if he's right by the basket. So if Dalton Knecht is your number one guy right now, you're going to have to anticipate some inefficiencies, but he's never going to be the number one in a rotation in the regular season for this team. Yeah. So I think he seems smart. He seems smart enough to recognize what his lane will be in the games when they actually matter.
So see what it looks like. I am intrigued by Knecht. Gabe Vincent, somebody else that we can continue talking about, see what happens with him on Tuesday. He's looked good, and you can see where the difference could be with him being available. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers to the channel. Make another Locked On podcast your second listen of the day. How about the Locked On NBA show? It's a great way to catch up on everything going on all around the league. We will see everyone tomorrow.